Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Glad y'all are here for the LB's author chat with Adele Meyer. We're going to be discussing the Tobacco Wives. So glad y'all could make it. First of all, thank you, Adele, for being here. We're so excited that you could join us.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited, and thank you to everyone who has joined. I'm excited to talk to you all and talk to you again since we met in person.
Yeah, I was going to mention that I went to an author chat. It was kind of it was right at the beginning, sort of the release at Bookmarks. So happy Independent Bookstore to all those bookstores out there supporting authors. They do such a wonderful job and really introduce us to y'all. And through that connection, this is how the author chat happened. So thank you so much. Before we get started with the author chat, I just wanted to see if someone was here. And I'm not sure if she is, so I may wait a minute to do that. All right. I'm going to introduce Adele Myers. She grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, has a journalism degree from UNC Chapel Hill. I'm sure it's been a great year for a UNC grad.
Yes, she enjoyed all those Duke defeats.
She currently works in advertising and lives in Brooklyn, New York, with her husband, son, and their rescue dog Chipper. This is her first novel, and we're so glad we can support you and this wonderful piece of art. All right, this book has been named an Apple Book Author to Watch. You were the Barnes & Noble's Discover book, most anticipated by USA Today, W Magazine, New York Post, Parade, Bustle, BuzzFeed, Reader's Digest, Pop Sugar, and more. It's been really well received. I've seen so much buzz on Instagram. I'm just so excited for you. Has this been an awesome ride?
It has. It's just been incredible. I have wanted to publish a book since I was, as long as I can remember. Like as a little girl, I always wanted to be a writer. And I've written in my career, working in public relations and advertising, of course. But, it's just been a long time coming, and I just could not be more thrilled. It kind of still doesn't feel real. It's exciting to me to talk with readers. And, I'm just kind of still amazed.
I guess it's a little bit nervous too, because you worked on this project for so long. You mentioned that it began as a seed while you were at UNC. Can you kind of tell us about those beginning steps and how it progressed?
Sure. So basically, the book was inspired by the fact that my grandmother was a hairdresser for the wives of R.J. Reynolds tobacco executives in the 1940s. And I was always fascinated with the idea of these women. And I found myself, as I got older, writing about them. And I first wrote a short story about them in 2000. And I actually found the story recently. And I invited my writing teacher to join tonight. Maybe she'll be able to hop in. If she does, Alexandra, please announce yourself. But this was a teacher that I had actually after college. I was taking some classes at night, some short story classes. And she had given me some notes on the story. And then one of the things that she said, "Oh, Alexandra's here. I'm so excited."
Hi, Alexandra.
Hi.
So one of the things that she had written, oh, there she is. Yay.
Hey,
thank you so much. It was very last minute that I invited you, so I'm so happy.
I'm just sitting around.
It's perfect.
Great. So one of the things that Alexandra had written on this story was that she felt that there was a longer piece here and that there may even be a novel. And that kind of was just one of those moments that like planted this seed with me, that stayed with me. I like to say it germinated for many, many years, over 20 years. This was like 20 years ago. And I guess it was about 8 years ago that I decided that I really wanted to try to write a novel. Up until then, I had been doing short stories, and my writing really kind of took a backseat to the rest of my life. It was something I enjoyed, but I was very kind of all my creative energy was spent on my job and my family. I have a son and my husband, and but I made a commitment about 8 years ago. And actually I got back in touch with Alexandra, and she recommended a book that I look at, which I think I have nearby, which is the Elizabeth George book, Right Away. And it's one author's take on how an approach to a novel, because I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never written such a long piece before. And so that was 8 years ago. And I certainly didn't work on it steadily, but I was committed to doing it and slowly working toward getting a manuscript finished.
So what did that look like? Because you have a full-time career, a family, and now you've decided I'm going to make this novel happen. So what does your day look like? I mean, what is the process to get to now?
Right. I mean, the way that it worked is I would have chunks of time that I would carve out, usually on the weekends, when I could write for like 3 to 4 hours. 4 is kind of my breaking point where I have to take a pause. And those would be my main writing times. But then what I would do is I would write, like a chapter or two on the computer, and I would print out the chapters, and then I would carry them around with me during the week. And whenever I had time, like during lunch at my job, I'd take like a break and go to a coffee shop, and I would like go back over and over those pages. And if I felt like they were in good shape and then I could keep going, I would just keep writing longhand. And even like when my son, when I'm waiting for my son at basketball practice in the car, or, I just kind of, it's like stolen moments on the subway. But sometimes I feel like I get really good ideas and things kind of crystallize for me when I work that way. Like, I kind of like that. I don't feel like it's a sacrifice. I feel like it's kind of like I go in deep into the writing, and then I step away and I live my life. And sometimes a character will pop into mind, or something that I've been trying to solve will make sense to me as I go about my life.
Now, how did the pandemic affect all that routine? Because, this book didn't come out until afterwards. I mean, I know a lot of it happens beforehand. There's a long process of publishing in between, but how did that affect it?
Yes. So when the pandemic hit in March, I had been working with my agent. It took me about a year and a half to find an agent, like to pitch and find someone. And I started working with her. And then we worked together for about a year to make some changes and to polish the manuscript. And it's so funny. I feel like I was pretty naive coming into this. I thought like once I sent it off and an agent wanted to work with me, that I was like done. I'm like, all right, I'm done. No, I had a lot more work to do. And so right when the pandemic hit, it was ready. It was finally ready to go out to publishers. So I didn't have a publisher yet. And my agent said, I just don't think we should go right now. People are not focused and reading, not readers, but editors. They've got their little kids at home. Everyone's anxious. Like, I just think we have to pause for a while. And that was really kind of devastating. I mean, of course, I was more concerned about what was going on in the world, but I just felt like, gosh, I may have just missed my window to get this published. But about 6 months later in the fall, we talked about it again and decided, what, publishers are still going to need books, editors are still going to need to, have books on their roster. And so that's when she approached publishers and got interest from several, and I ended up going with HarperCollins.
Well, let's talk about this beautiful, beautiful cover. And I think it's such a catchy title. So if you can go through how you got to this title, and I just love it. Like it's a great, great cover. It gets compliments all the time.
Oh, I think they did a beautiful job. I'm very grateful for the designer and the way they interpreted it. So the book actually has had three different titles. When I came to Alexandra, my teacher who's on, for anyone who joined, when I came to her with a full manuscript, I believe at that point it was called The Clearing, the book, which sounds like a thriller or something. And it referred to a pivotal scene that happened in a tobacco field between Maddie, the main character, and another character who did not survive into the final book. She was the daughter of Mitzi Winston, the main tobacco wife. And so the story at that point was more about the relationship between the two girls, between Maddie and Mitzi's daughter, Virginia. So for those of you who've read the book already, you know there is no daughter of Mitzi, doesn't have a daughter in the book. So the title, The Clearing, made no sense anymore. So, and then I think actually about a year later, I ended up changing the title to Bright Leaf, which is the name of the fictional town that's based on Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I think that's a perfectly fine name. But what I realized at a certain point that what everyone was more interested in was the tobacco wives, and that's what inspired me. And when I was looking for an agent, I decided to change the title. And I also decided to spend a lot of time on my pitch and really honing that. And I found examples online of authors like winning pitch letters that they sent to their agent. Like, this is the letter that got me my agent. And it's funny because I've spent my whole career in marketing and advertising. So you would have thought this was like the first thing that I did, but it's not. It was, kind of, it's funny. I spent so much time on, the manuscript, but the pitch to the agent is really important. Like, that's what gets you noticed. And I got a lot more interest after that, like right away. And so I think it's really important. And I think there's something about the tobacco wives that is kind of intriguing and conjures up, just a thought. I mean, it's funny. My editor actually told me that she was talking with the head, like her boss at the publisher, and telling her, I want to acquire this new book. It's called The Tobacco Wives. And her editor said, "Stop right there. You had me at Tobacco Wives." And I thought that was really funny and telling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that tells you right there that that's a title that's going to make someone pull a book off a shelf, which is exactly what you want. Yep. Do you want to describe, because we're about to get into the book, do you want to give a short summary, or do you want me to do it? I didn't know if I kind of want to hear your pitch now.
Yeah, sure. No, I can give a short summary. So The Tobacco Wives is the story of a young seamstress in 1946 North Carolina who inadvertently uncovers some dangerous truths that are being hidden by the husbands of the wives of the tobacco executives who she works for. And this all takes place in the fictional town of Bright Leaf, North Carolina, which is the tobacco capital of the South. That's my short and sweet.
I love it. And so if you don't know, she's referring to Winston-Salem. She's basing it loosely on Winston-Salem, which would be the Reynolds family. But instead, this family is the Winston, which is also a play off the tobacco industry.
Right.
You mentioned in your somewhere that I read that you said that you define your genre as Southern discomfort. I saw that somewhere. I don't know. Do you?
Alexandra gave me that. I think my teacher gave me that.
I liked it.
And it stuck. I thought that was that's my niche, I think.
It absolutely is a great niche. And I did not know I did this, but I tend to gravitate towards it, not even knowing that that's what I was calling it. So what is it about Southern discomfort that you love so much?
Well, I think any good book is going to have conflict, right? I mean, that's what keeps you reading. You want to know what's going to happen. And I grew up with so many stories, and I grew up, spent my whole childhood in North Carolina and surrounded by really interesting people. And it's interesting. I didn't kind of consciously decide to do a story about a cover up, but that is very much at the heart of this story. And I'm starting to research for a second book and work on a concept. And it also has to do with a cover up. And I think in Southern society, there are a lot of secrets. There's a lot of kind of image, and like there's like
Don't
this
air your dirty laundry.
right. I mean, there's kind of this putting on airs kind of thing. I mean, some of what I'm saying is old fashioned, but I think it's kind of endemic to Southern life, is kind of, putting on a pretty face, smile pretty, even when things are falling apart all around you. And I like to play with that in my writing.
Is your next novel geared towards Southern discomfort, or are you kind of jumping to something new?
No, it's Southern discomfort. Again. And I'm seeing all these comments that someone says their college roommate went on to work for RJ Reynolds. Yes. Yeah, my family, and someone else gets it. Smile and nod and everything is okay. Yes. That's it.
That's exactly right. Well, this novel begins with Maddie being woken up in the middle of the night and sort of dashed off to Brightleaf. Did the book always start there? Because it's such a kind of a wake-up call for everybody. It gets your attention and gets you into the moment. I mean, or was that something that you discussed later through the process?
No, that's not where it started. In fact, it started initially with Maddie on the bus with her Aunt Etta. The reader doesn't see her being dropped off. She's already there. And they're going to the first appointment at the Winston's home. That new chapter came when I started talking to my agent. She actually asked me, she had a suggestion, because at the time, Maddie, the main character, was younger. She was only 12 years old in that version of the book. And my agent suggested aging her up. She wanted her to be like 15, a little bit older. And I think part of that was because, well, a big part of it was because she would see the world from a more sophisticated point of view. She's a little bit older. There could be a love interest. And so she asked me pretty early on if I would rework the first chapter and age Maddie up. And she also had some suggestions about the voice, about the writing itself, because she had seen another piece, a short story that I had written. And she felt that there was something in that was more kind of vulnerable. And there was something about the voice that she wanted me to try to bring to this first chapter. And so I rewrote the chapter, and I don't know why I decided to start it earlier, but I did. And I think it has much more immediacy, and it sets up who Maddie is, where she's coming from, and pulls the reader in. And so that's kind of how that chapter came about.
Well, I think it gave us the foundation we needed to move her along. I appreciated that she was 15. I don't think a 12-year-old could have had the realizations and done the cover story that you needed her to do. And by the way, someone's mentioning her hair, that she loved how you used her hair through it. I read this book after I met you, and so I pictured your hair but red, because you have such great curls. I did. So, Maddie has your hair. Now we move on very quickly into tobacco country, and she talks about how she knows the different types just by smell. I didn't know that was possible. I mean, I live here in North Carolina, but I did not grow up here. I grew up in Texas. So I found that fascinating, and that the tobacco industry was so loyal and so dedicated to the industry, not just because it's a money maker, but it was their livelihood, in their veins. And you mentioned this. Can you talk a little bit about that industry?
Sure. And I feel like a lot, I mean, I grew up around it, so I was always aware of it. I spent a lot of time in Winston-Salem because both sets of my grandparents were from there and lived there. My parents met there at R.J. Reynolds High School. Everything was named Reynolds, Reynolda. And so I grew up in it, but some of the most interesting stories that I got were from my father, because he, as a teenager, worked in the cigarette factories during his summers. And those were really coveted jobs. The working conditions there were terrible. And some of the scenes in the book that take place in the factory come from real stories that he told me. But he talks about how proud, like incredibly proud everyone was to be a part of helping to build the tobacco capital of the South. And they really did. I mean, it really fueled the economy. I mean, every school, hospital, library, bank, everything was supported by tobacco money. And as I was having these conversations with him, I thought it struck me that it was obviously, it's terrible what happened, and that the dangers of smoking, they became aware of that and didn't do the right thing and inform people and covered it up. I mean, it's awful, but it's also tragic that something that the whole state was so proud of ended up being so dangerous. And these people who felt that they were, doing good were actually part of harming people, even killing them.
Someone mentioned in the comments, and it kind of blew me away, the swept up remains to the reconstructed cigarettes. I mean, when did I'm assuming that stopped, and how long did that process last?
I don't know if it stopped, but that's a true story that my grandfather told my father. And it like exactly like it is in the book, that was a factory that was under armed guard, that only certain people could go in, because that's what they were doing there. They were taking the sweepings and bits of whatever tobacco from the floor and dust, whatever happened to be, and cooking it up in this slurry in this other factory, and then turning that into reconstituted cigarettes, like the non-branded cigarettes, which were called Recon. I think they probably still do make reconstituted cigarettes. I don't think they ever made it public that it was from floor sweepings, but that's the inside scoop that I got from my family.
I want to shift gears a little bit to Maddie. You chose for her to get inside this society by sewing. I know you mentioned that you had a grandmother that was a seamstress. Do you have background in this, or did you just have, I mean, there was so many beautiful descriptions, and the process of pinning and pleating and all those details. That's not something that a normal person would have knowledge of. So did you research that? Did you have experience?
I did. I don't sew. I mean, I helped my grandmother when I was little. And I think that that's where some of those, like, I have a lot of memories of going to the fabric store, helping her cut out things, but she kind of like always kept me at a distance. Like I certainly did not have Maddie's skills and was not allowed to help with anything of importance. So I had to do a lot of research, and I watched a lot of videos. I read sewing blogs to try to get the lingo down. I even ordered vintage patterns that I found I'm a very sensory oriented person. So I wanted to actually like touch them and feel them and remember what they were like. And it was interesting because as I was doing that research, I would get like tidbits that ended up being in the book. Like there's one scene where Maddie brings some patterns to an appointment with Cornelia and Rose, and she accidentally brings a pattern for a feed bag dress. And that was something like they would use bags from feed or from corn or whatever, and use that instead of fabric during the war because fabric was scarce. And so that ended up coming from me doing the research and was a way for me to kind of reveal who Rose is. And
Well, I had to look up what a cartwheel tilt hat was because I wasn't sure. I know that was the hat she was designing for Cornelia. Is that common for a seamstress to take on making hats as well as dresses?
I think back then, seamstresses did more kind of millinery, I guess is what they call it, like the making of the hats. I think over time, people tended to start to specialize in that. I mean, it's a real art in and of itself. I did a certain amount of research. I didn't have to do a ton. I just had to do enough to be able to talk it and describe the making of it. So,
well, I found it absolutely fascinating. I have done some quilting, not so much sewing, but I see other people here who enjoyed it as much, who were sewers and quilters. So for me, I loved it. Now, you mentioned that sewing for Maddie was really therapy because she could clear her mind, especially when she thought about her father, when she was grieving. And then again, when she was stressed, when she was doing, when she was revealing all this information, that was her go-to. Looks like there's some feedback. What I guess I went to a chat and just listened to Emily St. John Mandel, and they were talking about writers when they get in that situation and they're stressed, what they do. And she mentioned piano. Someone else mentioned weeding their garden. What is your go-to for you when you need to just shut it all out and it's stressful and you need to go somewhere else? What do you do?
I think walking really helps me, like just to get outside, go for a walk in the park, kind of get some stimulation, be in nature. And that tends to help me kind of clear my mind and be able to refocus and get back to it.
Same here. I really enjoy it. So many topics were discussed in this book. I mean, it is chock full. The Mrs. degree, grieving spouses versus grieving children was discussed. The haves and the have-nots. When you discuss the feed sack, Rose was so appalled that you would even, that would even be shown to her. And
Right.
Maddie's reactions to being put in that situation, knowing where she came from. Women's freedom about driving, being able to drive a car, and then the working conditions. What made you want to tackle? I mean, these are some big ticket items here. How were you able to keep track of it, and how did you decide what was going to go into this novel?
It was a lot to try to thread everything through and make it all connect in a way that was cohesive. And so there was a lot of editing. I bought, these big, huge Post-it notes and put them all over the walls and, tracked different storylines. And because you want to make sure that each character is evolving and growing and going on a journey throughout the book. There were times after I started working with my editor that we weren't sure if the whole strike scene and the storyline about the women workers, that wasn't feeling cohesive. And so I really fought to keep that in because I thought that it was really interesting and she wanted it in as well, but I had to really rework things. And then in earlier versions of the book, there was actually a whole other storyline, which I am so thankful we got rid of, which was in a previous version, Maddie's mother actually comes back. Like she comes to Brightleaf. She kind of makes a big scene in front of everyone. She's having some serious mental issues and she ends up going into a mental hospital and there's a whole scene there. And so there was this whole other element of Maddie dealing with her mother's mental illness. So that my editor, when I signed with HarperCollins, she said, I feel like this is going to be a distraction. You already have so many different areas that you're trying to cover. And I mean, initially I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to have to revise the whole book again, because that was like, that's when I had to go back and then make Dr. Hale, like add the storyline of Aunt Etta being so gravely ill and Dr. Hale, because in the previous version, he was helping Maddie's mother, and that was the threat, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Mary wants to know if, when keeping track of all those details, does that bog down your creativity because you're having to be so technical and keep that streamline going?
I wouldn't say it bogs down your creativity, but it's almost like, for me, I had to kind of go into different modes. Like I would spend time kind of mapping things out and saying, okay, here's how I need to structure this scene, and I need to move this and that. And then I would kind of step away. And then when I actually write, I am not thinking about all that other plot stuff. I'm just focused on, okay, I know I need to create this scene or this chapter. And it's funny, like I do little things. I actually bought, because I had to do all the editing at home during the lockdown. So I couldn't go to my writing space, which I usually go to. And so I actually have it. And I didn't tell you this, but whoever wins the book, I'm going to also give you a tobacco vanilla candle, which smells like vanilla, not tobacco. And I would light that. Like I got a little desk for my bedroom. I would light the candle and like try to get myself into the flow.
Well, so are you a plotter or a pantser then? Because I'm hearing kind of both. Are you sort of midway down the?
I'm a little bit of both. I was initially a pantser. Like I just, whatever came out, came out. But now I've learned a lot about plotting. I really didn't know that much about plotting initially, but I've learned a lot in the last year and a half.
Well, we were talking about the work conditions, but what really blew my mind was you have the wives and children, family members, and all their workforce smoking these cigarettes when in the background research shows that it's harmful. So, it's really a very timely book. I just saw, and I sent you, that the FDA, it just came out this week, that the FDA is now trying to ban all menthol cigarettes.
Right.
And I guess here we are, it's 2022. And
I know.
This has been, it blows my mind. So, What were your thoughts on this? I mean, as soon as they start, smoking, I'm thinking, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's, I also have been following what's going on with vaping, because vaping, and e-cigarettes, the FDA is also coming down on them. And it's kind of like, it's hard to believe. And yet I think we see it happen all the time, that things are very slow to change, and the same problems that they were dealing with 80 years ago are still here. It's interesting. Someone in the comments asked if I had gotten any feedback from the Reynolds family. And this question made me think of that, because there is one member of the family, Patrick Reynolds, who wrote a book that I used during my research, and it was called The Gilded Leaf. And he is the one family member who broke from the family and actually started a tobacco-free organization to try to stop smoking. Like, he went completely against the family. And his book was so interesting to me. And I think I really wanted to understand what it would take to stand up to your own family, like what it would take for Maddie to do that, what it would take for Mitzi to actually do the right thing. And I sent him a Facebook message through his organization like 3 months ago saying, hey, I'm coming out with this book. I wanted to thank you. Your book was very helpful to me. I would love to send you a signed copy or whatever. And didn't hear anything until 2 days ago. And he wrote me back. And
what did he say?
He said, your book sounds fascinating. I would love to see a copy. Please let me know what the postage will cost and I'll reimburse you. And I thought, are you kidding me? No. And he said, I'm interested in what your main character did. And so and then I emailed him, and I actually found some old photos. My great uncle was a portrait artist, and he painted portraits of 7 R.J. Reynolds tobacco executives and many of their wives. And he was a pretty, like, he did very well as a portrait artist. He painted presidents, I mean, and, other figures. And so I found all these pictures, and I printed copies for Patrick Reynolds because some of them are his family members. So I sent them to him. So maybe I was like, maybe we'll write an article together or do something. He's still fighting the good fight. So
He's still down here in Winston-Salem.
He's out in California. He's based out in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really, I mean, it takes a lot of courage.
He might have had to leave town after.
That's what I'm wondering. But it takes a lot of courage to step out like that, totally against your family. And it's kind of what Mitzi was trying to do. So
right.
It's kind of neat that the stories parallel there a little bit.
Right.
Now, you did mention you mentioned a song in the book, and also a book that Cornelia gives to Maddie, or either one of those, because I looked them up. Were either one of those real, or were those made up for this book?
Is the song you're referring to at the very beginning of the book?
I quote it: "When your heart aches, when you fear it may break, believe that it isn't so. The sun will rise, wipe the tears from your eyes, and smile pretty, my darling dear."
Yeah. So I made that up. But I made it up like after, when we were going through proofreading and editing, because I had real lyrics from a song, but we were going to have to get go through legal to get the rights to use them and all this stuff. And I was like, you know what, just let me make something up. So that's not a real song. And then the book that Cornelia gave to Maddie was loosely based on a book that I used for my research that was called, I think I have it, Southern Lady from Pedestal to Politics. And it was a book that did what that book did, which was share stories about women, kind of the hidden history of women's activism during the early and mid 1900s, because there's a lot that they were doing behind the scenes that people didn't really know about, or that they didn't get credit for. But they were bringing about a lot of change in society, and through influencing their husbands and other men.
Well, I think it's great that you're bringing attention. I think that it's starting to happen here in Greensboro. It was part of the Underground Railroad. And so women that helped in that, and helped, with World War II, with concentration. It's just been a lot of activism to get women recognized, either in monuments, plaques, just something, because it's almost like they didn't exist. Through art, or really, through recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of disgraceful that they're absent from a lot of what they accomplished and what they did. And so, and I gave a lot of that to Cornelia. Like, I wanted Cornelia, who was like the matriarch of the tobacco wives, to be the one who never got her due, and saw something in Maddie and wanted to try to kind of, in her very gruff, direct way, mentor Maddie and bring her along.
Let's talk about Cornelia. Someone asked in the chat, is she loosely based off someone? I mean, she's so fascinating.
She's not based on, she's not based on any one person. I would say she's kind of an amalgam. She's my favorite character too. Someone just said she was their favorite. She's my favorite too. Like, I love a curmudgeon-y, gruff, but yet good at heart person. And I was picturing in my mind Dame Maggie Smith from Downton Abbey. Like, I was picturing her, that type.
I agree. I could see her playing that role. Well, let's talk about that. Has there been any movie talk or TV talk for this book?
You can't really talk about any of that until it's like a done deal.
Okay.
But I certainly hope that's in the future.
Okay. We'll take it. Okay. Did you picture any other actors for while you were writing, or was it just Maggie?
I actually pictured, although I think she's a little bit old for the role, but she could pull it off. I pictured Reese Witherspoon as Mitzi. And I think for Maddie, I wanted kind of an unknown young actress to be Maddie.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you like the idea of a movie or a series, or does it matter? I mean,
I would be thrilled with either one. I'm not.
I hear you. All right. So I'm always shocked, and I know it's real, but how men describe women, throughout your book: dramatic, overreact, sensitive, the weaker sex. How much does that affect your characters, their storyline, and this novel? Because we're coming from 2022, but that was real stuff back then. So that sexism, how did you get into that mindset for these characters?
Part of it was just through the research. But I have to say, like, I grew up in the 70s and 80s in North Carolina, and men would talk to me that way. I can remember when I first moved to New York and I got my first job in PR. And I remember going back home, and I think I was going to like a political event with my father, and I was so proud and excited about this new job. And I was with my dad, and I think there were some other young people, and there was like a young man my age, and the men we were talking to were asking him all about his job. And then they turned to me and said, "When are we going to get you married off, little lady?" And that was in the 90s. So I think it's still prevalent. So it was not much of a stretch for me to imagine what it was like then. I will say, I also, there's a whole part of the book about the advertising and the use of advertising to mislead the public about smoking and cover up the dangers proactively. And if you look at advertising from a certain time in history, that's such a window into the way that women are spoken about, etc. So that also was illuminating. And on my website, I actually have some of the examples of the old ads, which are just, some of them are hard to believe. They're so blatantly sexist, condescending. So that was helpful as well.
I would encourage everybody to go check out her website, because it's not just one or two. I mean, she lists a good chunk of ads for mothers, for just women, doctors on there. It really is eye-opening. And, the ads didn't even, they didn't even go away until not that long ago. So it's,
Right.
it's very fascinating to get that eye on history through print. It's a perfect way to start and to use your evidence right through your book.
Right.
Well, I think it's time for us to take a picture.
Okay.
If that's okay with everybody. I don't want to miss people on that are leaving or going to be here. So I will ask Marcella if she's ready. I don't see her on the screen anymore, but Marcella, if you can let us know.
Sure. Do you not see the gallery?
I can't, but I'm sure you can on yours. So I will just
let me work on
count down.
Give me a second.
Oh, there we go.
You can see it? Okay.
All right, everybody.
Alexandra, you have the cookie. I had a cookie at my at my launch party.
All right, just give us a countdown, Marcella.
All right, hold on a second. Okay, I just want to make sure y'all could all see. All right, I'm gonna put my book down. There we go. All right. Shoot, sorry. All right, everybody say cheese.
Cheese.
think I got it.
Got it?
Got it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all. I want to
Nice to
before
see
we-
everyone's faces.
Yeah, it's nice. All right. So it was just announced by virtue of authority vested in the Constitution of the laws of the U.S. Do hereby proclaim May 3rd as National Teacher Appreciation Day, and starting today through May 7th as National Teacher Appreciation Week. So I wanted to say a big thank you. I don't know if my favorite 5th grade teacher, Miss Mitchell, ever made it on here, but if not, I'll definitely send her this video. She was such an encouragement for reading for me. And so much so that she said, go find a book. If you love it, I'll read it to the class. And I found Wait Till Helen Comes, and I loved that book. And so we all read it, the whole class loved it. And we ended up writing in for it to be a nomination for the Bluebonnet Award in Texas, and it won that year. So kudos to Miss Mitchell for, and we share the same birthday, so it was really cool.
You've been
and
you've been supporting books and authors since you were in 5th grade.
Yeah, I loved it. Well, and that is thanks to my mom, which I think she's on here, Sonia Moore. She's a teacher as well. And we lived at the library. So thank you, libraries. And thank you to my mom just for encouraging that. And she reads along with me, and she does all the author chats. And I can't tell you how many times my classmates come up to me and say, your mom was my favorite teacher. So all you teachers out there, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate it. You're educating that next generation, and you make more marks on those kids in good ways than you'll ever know. So, and I know Adele, she has her.
Yes, Alexandra Shelley is on, who was my short story writing teacher in a class that I took at night after I moved to New York, and has been in my life ever since. And that's been over 20 years. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Alexandra, but I just so appreciate you. I think more than anything, you just instilled confidence in me. And early on, that was so important, just to encourage me, because it's hard to know whether you're any good. Like it's hard to, and also like, is anyone going to want to read this? And just so many doubts. And so you always encouraged me.
Well, you encouraged me. I just wanted to say that comment on the story 20 years ago was like a 3-page story. And, as a teacher, I knew good writing when I saw it. I'm a book editor as well. And Adele was just, the minute I read her writing in a new school class, it was clear to me she was a writer. But that short story, which was just a few-page assignment in which students actually switched, they came up with ideas for story and I think a title, and then switched them and wrote each other's stories. And so people just tossed it off. And I remember writing at the bottom of it, yeah, I'm really curious about these tobacco wives. And I think there might be a novel here, but you dash these things off and it never occurs to you someone's going to follow up on it. And then I had the privilege of watching Adele work on this book and just turning it into such an amazing story over the years. It just gave me so much sort of confidence in just the act of teaching. And I'm glad I know how to spot a good writer. So.
Well, Alexandra, thank you from us readers for identifying that and giving her, the confidence to move on. It's an awesome book, and you were a pivotal point in that part of her career. So thank you. Well, I say we go to questions. If you have a question that you want to ask Adele, go ahead and raise your hand at the bottom. She'll go down to reactions and then hit raise your hand. Let's see. Does anybody have anything? She's open. All right, everybody's going to be shy. I'm going to go back through the chat because
there's some in the chat, I think, too. Yeah,
that we missed. Yeah, so I'll go through there. All right, we have people here from Tennessee, Texas. A lot of Go Heels here.
Yay.
Phenomenal debut. We agree. All right. Looks like there may be one at the bottom. All right. Did you have any input into the cover?
I had, before they even started designing the cover, my editor asked me to let her know if I had any thoughts in advance. And she said, if you have examples of covers that you like or that you don't like, or something that you really don't want on the cover, please share that with me. And I joke that she was probably sorry she asked, because as a marketing person, I put together like a little PowerPoint presentation with all my ideas and some stuff I didn't want. And so I did want something kind of arresting, and I wanted there to be kind of a key visual. I thought it would be cool to do something with the leaves. And I didn't want a picture of a woman, and specifically, I didn't want a woman's back. Alexandra's going to laugh at this.
That's a World War II. It's so common now.
It's like every book, and I don't mean to hate on it, because there's some beautiful covers of women's backs, but there's so many of them, and I feel like they all kind of look alike, and I wanted this book to stand out. And so, but that was what I shared with them. And then they came back to me with the cover. Very little changed. I loved it right away. Like, I just loved it. I felt like the lighter is this iconic thing that has this nostalgia to it. And it's beautiful, yet actually, Alexandra, I always copy your line. You said it looks like a Lily Pulitzer dress with a hand grenade in the pocket. I love that description.
That's the best.
That's the best.
Well, and I'm glad you stood up to not having a woman's back, because that's exactly what Maddie didn't want, was to see. She wanted women, and Mitzi even, they all wanted to be front and center.
That's
and
so
to be
true.
seen.
I didn't think about that. I just was thinking about the visual, but that's so true.
It would have been going against the whole theme. So I think we do have a question. Nikki, if you want to unmute and Marcella get her highlighted, we can do that. All right. Maybe. Nikki, can you hear me?
There you go. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble highlighting her.
That's okay. I don't have my picture up. And I'm
that
already...
must be it. That's okay.
Okay. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Nikki.
Adele, love the book. Love this book so much. Laura Beth will tell you, I am not a historical fiction fan, but man, this just grabbed me. And probably because of my proximity to Winston-Salem and having grown up with, all of that so close by. But I have read the book, and I have listened to it on audiobook. Narrator was perfect. Did you have any choice or input in the narrator?
I did have input. In fact, my editor sent me voice samples for five different voices for Maddie, the young, for the majority of the book. And then in the epilogue, she's older. So there were 5 different voices for the older version. And I selected my 2 choices we ended up getting. And Shannon McManus is the one who narrates the majority of the book. And I love her. I found out later that she's from North Carolina, which I thought was really interesting, because I think it's easy to get the Southern accents wrong and to overdo it. And it can be a real turnoff. And so that was really important to me.
Well, the other issue is if you have a bad narrator, it may turn the reader off from your book. Exactly. And so you don't want the narrator to do, and disjustice to your novel and not, no one read it or listen to it because it's a bad narrator. And I agree. It's a great narrator.
Right.
All right.
Follow up to that. I did just DNF a book partly because the narrator totally ruined the Southern accent. So I loved both of their jobs in this. So great job.
Thanks. It takes a village. It's funny. There's so many things that go into a book being successful or not, far beyond the story. We've talked about the cover, the voices. I mean, all of it has to work together, I think.
Sarah wrote, she loves this novel. It was completely different perspective on the World War II time period. So refreshing to read about this time period. Why did you choose to set the novel in the spot that it is in history?
I decided to set it Actually, during my research, I was very interested when I read about that time, just as the men were starting to return from the war and displace women who had taken over their jobs. I thought that was a really interesting point in history. And as I learned more about that time, I saw that some historians say that that was the beginning of the modern women's rights movement, because women it was their first taste of working outside the home for many of them, for making their own money, from getting the sense of satisfaction that comes with knowing that you can take care of yourself. And then as the men were returning, they expected things to go back to normal and for the women to go on back home, and give me my job back. And so I really wanted to set it during that time.
Brittany wanted to know, with the pages of the book, it's a different look than most novels. Was that she loves it and she wants to know, why it matches the book so well? Was that a decision you got to make, publisher?
Yeah, it was the deckled edges on the book, and the weight of the weight of the paper was a design and publisher decision. I didn't actually even know about it until I saw the final book. So they decided that. But I think they did a beautiful job. I mean, you can tell there was a lot of care taken with the design, which I really am grateful for.
Marcella asked if you can tell us anything more about your next Southern Discomfort topic, or anything about the book, any tidbits that you can give us.
Well, okay, I can give you just a little, because I haven't kind of sold it in completely with my publisher yet. So I don't want to jinx myself, but it is going to be another book that's based in the South. It'll be based probably in either North Carolina or South Carolina. And it will involve another true to life cover-up situation, but one that is not well known, and it has to do with academia. And yeah, so that I'm deep in research and putting together kind of for the next step, what I need to do is put together an outline of the whole plot, and then write like the first 3 chapters. And then based on that, my publisher will say yay or nay. But I've already gotten some encouraging feedback. My agent really likes the concept, and my editor is excited about it. So hopefully that'll get going.
So Angela asked, will it be for adults? Because I had a question on this as well. Like, Tobacco Wives could be YA to me as well. I wouldn't have a problem giving this to my 15-year-old daughter. And like Ruta Septes, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name properly, is very much as a crossover audience. What do you say about that for this book and your new one?
So they're both for adult, but early on when I was writing the initial manuscript, I was in part of a writers group with some other women, and they were all published YA writers. And they were great mentors to me. And I think because they were YA and because the main character was a young girl, they were really encouraging me to pursue, YA. And it's funny, I'm like smiling at Alexandra again, because I brought the manuscript to her, and I remember she went through it, and then we met, and I think you said something like this book doesn't know whether it wants to be YA or adult. Like, you need to like make a decision, because they are very different, even though to a reader it may not seem that way. From what I understand, YA writing is very different. Is that right? You're nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the problem is you have a narrator who's that young, then people would assume it's YA, but it gives you, some advantages, but also so many limitations. And just kudos to you, Adele, also for aging your narrator. I think by the end, she was like 4 years older than she originally was.
Yeah.
And each revision was a complete renovation of the book, which you were able to do.
Yeah, that was pretty, that was kind of daunting, because when you think about it, sounds like a small change, but when you think about the difference in the way a 12-year-old sees the world and a 15-year-old sees the world, it's very different. But I have gotten questions from readers and from others saying that it could be, that it was appropriate as a YA. I mean, it's pretty G-rated, although all the like death and smoking stuff is, but I think it's appropriate for a younger audience as well.
Well, I think the younger generations have heard so much that nicotine kills. So,
Right.
I think that, like I said, I just wouldn't have a problem. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so it's kind of interesting to read a book from that perspective. Now, but we're about running out of time. Can I ask you what you're reading? Oh, wait, I don't want to miss Brittany. Sorry, can we get Brittany first? I'll let her ask her question since I've been talking so much. Hi, Brittany.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much
Hi.
for writing this book. I just really enjoyed it. I loved everything about it. And maybe it is because I'm partial because I'm from the South as well.
Okay.
Specifically North Carolina. So go
Oh,
Heels.
great.
I actually kind of wanted to ask about, because you were talking about the YA aspect and how there is kind of that romance aspect. Since she's 15, she is a little bit older with David. And maybe it's because I've read so many other books where this has happened, but I kind of kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, was that ever an option for you with him not supporting her? Or because I loved that so much. I loved that in the end, he ended up being that supportive person and helping her get through that and confronting, Dr. Hale and all those people. But was that an option for you?
It was. And it's funny though, I think I had to develop his character a little bit more. Like I added him, because Maddie was older. So he was like an additional new character. And initially he was almost too agreeable. Like I ended up adding some conflict, like making him really close to Mr. Winston and making him, a patient of Dr. Hale's. And I think if that storyline, the relationship between the two of them had been more prevalent, I could have done even more with it. But as it is, it wasn't, it didn't have a huge presence in the book, I think, as much as, for instance, Maddie's relationship with Mitzi. Did that answer you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if that was something that you had thought about in the writing process. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I had someone message me through the chat too, and she wants to know, because it is historical fiction, and you touched on this a little bit in your author notes, how you made the decision to change up the timeline of history as far as what they knew when they knew, and how that works into a historical fiction novel. And has anybody been upset with that?
Yeah, so I did a couple of things because I wanted to set the book right at the end of World War II. I did have some of the stuff come out. In actuality, it came out later than 1946. Things didn't start to come out until the 1950s and 60s, and that initial research that came out about the dangers was related to lung disease and lung cancer. And in the earlier version of the book, I did focus more on lung. I focused on lung, disease, and David's asthma was a much bigger part of the storyline. But when I started working with my editor, we decided that it would be better to focus on women, just because the book is so geared towards women, and the fact that, Mitzi was trying to have a baby and all of this, and that I was trying to achieve too much by focusing on the lung disease and the effects on babies and mothers. So, and I have had a couple of comments of people saying, like, I can't get beyond the fact that, that I tinkered with the timeline and whatever. But only like one or two people that I've heard from or read have said that. I mean, I think most people know that historical fiction is just that. It's fiction, but it's based based in some reality. So you, as an author, you do have license to do that as long as you let the reader know. And I explained what I did in the author's note. So hopefully that suffices.
Awesome. Really quick, any books you want to recommend to us to read?
I would like to recommend The Christie Affair, which I just finished, which was wonderful, another historical fiction. And then I just started Take My Hand, which is another Southern story. And I love it already. The writing is just beautiful. So I would recommend those.
And they both have great covers. So
Yes,
I
they do.
think they're gorgeous.
They do.
All right. I want to do the giveaway. I did a random draw, and Claire Talbot, raise your hand. Claire, are you still? Yep, she's still with us. Hey, Claire.
Here.
You have won the prize. And I see in the chat that she's a librarian and leads 2 book discussion groups. So this is a perfect person. If you already have the book, yeah, you can pass on to someone that will love it as much.
Yeah.
Well,
and I
thank
actually,
you so much.
sure.
I'm
And
so
I did,
excited.
and I didn't tell you this, but I did mention I'm going to also give you this candle, which is lovely, tobacco vanilla candle. And during my research, I found this cosmetics brand. It's called Besame. And they have a lipstick. I don't know if you guys can see this. Red Velvet 1946.
Ooh.
So they do replica makeup, because I wanted to know if the makeup was shaped differently. I wanted to try makeup from the 40s. And so this is like a beautiful red lipstick. So I'm going to give you one of these.
Wow, I am so excited.
And bubblegum cigarettes.
Well, Claire, if
awesome.
you can message me your address so I can share
Okay.
that, that would be fantastic. I'm not sure which medium you're on, but you can find me to message me that. That would be fantastic. We want to thank, go ahead.
Are you the person that did the group, like invited me to the group chat, like in Messenger?
That's me.
Okay.
Yes, I'm LB, or Laura, I'm Laura Beth. I have the Texas two names, so you can find me.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I want to thank Adele Myers, the teachers, all the moms joining us. Happy early Mother's Day to everybody.
Yeah.
Make sure you check out her website, follow her on Instagram. I'm going to post the picture. So if you want to share that, that would be great. We just want to get out, some promotion for her, for these debut authors. If you want to follow me, I'm have the LB's the Lover of Books on Facebook, and I'm also LB the Lover of Books on Instagram. And I've just started a YouTube channel. So I have all the recorded chats will be there in case you missed part of it. Thank you, Marcella, one of my Rice classmates, for recording and helping out in the background. I love you. Again, thanks to all the independent bookstores, especially Bookmarks, a nonprofit bookstore in Winston-Salem, for doing so much for the community and bringing in so many fabulous authors. Wouldn't have met Adele here without it. So again,
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome.
For organizing this, for inviting people, for supporting me in the book. I'm very grateful, and I'm excited to join some of your upcoming author chats. I'm going to be a participant listener.
Awesome. Well, we just coming up on June 5th, we have Carolyn Frost for Shadows of Pecan Hollow. I have on, I'm sorry. Yeah, she's June. That's right. June 5th. Before that, I just scheduled a new one. So get it in there for May 22nd for Melissa Fu for Peach Blossom Spring, a fabulous novel you'll want to read. That one's coming up and then June 12th, we have Dr. Kai Harris for What the Fireflies Knew. I have pretty much 2 or 3 chats going all the way through summer and into September. So you'll find something that you like, all different kind of genres. Thank you so much, Adele. We love you. We love your book. And have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.